So with the Lebanon ceasefire deal already, being in place for just a few days, Hezbollah has already managed to break it a few times, and Israel did respond. There were a few breaches. I think there was an activity in a missile factory, and Israel did respond by basically bombing it. Um, but there is also, I think, much bigger point that Netanyahu has made that basically, if there is a major violation of the ceasefire, a major violation of the deal, that Netanyahu will resume war and will I think we'll go into the specifics of what he said because it's good to get the actual quotation. So we'll go into that. Joining me, so that's what we'll be talking about today. Is this basically what will be the response from Netanyahu, from Israel, if this major violation happens? Joining me today is Mark Pellegrino. Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me today. Welcome to the Daily Objective. So, yeah, just starting. Sort of, I was sort of jumping behind what should I call this episode. Originally, it was Hezbollah will violate the ceasefire, and what I wanted to signify is like a big violation. But as I mentioned, they've already did violate it. But even if, let's say, this 40-day period goes through, and there is no major violation, and we sort of move on from there will be sort of like full-on peace between Lebanon and Israel, between Israel and Hezbollah. There will be violation in the future. That's the only reason Hezbollah exists, is to destroy Israel. That's the only reason why they would ever exist. That's the only reason why they keep on existing, is to destroy Israel. So that's something important to sort of remember. But the question is, what will Israel do when it happens? And sort of that's a maybe first question for you, Mark. Let's say this 60 days period goes through, sort of similar to in the 2006 during the UN Security Council Resolution 1701. There was peace, there was ceasefire, and there were breaches. And would this be different, Mark? What do you think? Will this be different? Will Israel really respond if there is a major breach?
Well, I hate the qualification of a major breach. It's like, the cancer is still there. There's always the possibility of that. And they've already demonstrated multiple times, and in this instance, that they're going to test the boundaries of what they can do. How far can they push Israel? What kind of responses are we going to get when we do this? Or what kind of response are we going to get when we do this? And they will continuously push the boundaries, and like they always have. And that's why the slightest violation of the treaty or the ceasefire needs to be met with overwhelming force. They need to know that any breach, no, we're not going to allow a few Hezbollah fighters to trickle their way into a bomb factory or to a missile site. We're not going to allow any of that. Any of and all of it is a major breach of our ceasefire. First of all, they shouldn't have a ceasefire to begin with. Their object shouldn't be just to, push Hezbollah back and incapacitate them enough to bring the 40,000 people who've been evacuated in the north back into their homes. It should be the total and absolute annihilation of Hezbollah. They are a fucking cancer. Just like Islamic Jihad over there, just like the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, just like Hamas, they are all kissing cousins and have the same goal, which is the annihilation of Israel, and they need to be eliminated, not compromised with, eliminated.
Yeah, I mean, just going to the what Netanyahu has said, because he spoke out for the first time since the deal went through, and something he said is that he instructed the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, that in case of, and here is, as you mentioned, the qualification, in case of massive violation of the agreement, the response would extend beyond surgical operations like we're doing now. So basically, and pointing out this on the statement. He said also that ceasefire could be short. He noted that Israel had enforced the ceasefire on the first day, basically referring to the strikes Israel did. And yeah, it's sort of it is this like weird word game. Like, what does a massive violation of a ceasefire even mean? What does it mean to
Well,
massively say it? I mean, he something the biggest thing that is being talked about from the Israel side when it comes to this is returning the Israelis home, because it's important to point out that for 14 months tens of thousands of Israeli had to basically evacuate the north, had to basically get out of the way in the north because of the threat that Hezbollah has posed. And for a long time, Israel has done nothing. Israel has decided to do something, and it was really successful for the whole time. Not even in parts. Since when it accepted that okay, we are going in Hezbollah, we will go after them. We will try to destroy them. They were very successful. There were very little setbacks, and now there is a ceasefire, and yeah, sort of when let's say the citizens of Israel get back to the north, uh, and Hezbollah will do something. I mean, what do they have to do? Mark, what could this massive violation even mean?
yeah, it's a rubber term that means nothing because it means anything. We don't. It expands the boundaries, and again, we see the double standard with Israel and the Arab terrorists, which is Israel has to stick to the letter of the law in any resolution either leveled against it or in any agreement that it makes with anybody else, while the Arabs can go off and violate it at will, provided they stay within the parameters of a very ill-defined agreement. And look, they've already violated it. It hasn't even it's not even cold yet, and they've violated it within 48 hours of the agreement. So it should be done. The ceasefire should be over. That's a massive violation. Let's not hold the Arabs to a double standard. Let's not condescend to them by acting like they can't be as civilized as the Israelis. Let's pretend they're human beings for a second. And when they engage in these violations, treat them like the criminals they are and annihilate the fuck out of not only them, but bring back the fucking troops. I mean, I know they're still occupying certain areas there until the wonderful Lebanese army goes in and takes control, like they've done
Well,
that.
and UNIFIL.
And they've done such a wonderful job of controlling Hezbollah in the past. I mean, this is just absurd. It's an absurd deal. Finish
Yeah,
the freaking job.
I mean, just going on to more statements from Netanyahu, he said the war will not end until we realize all its goals, including the return of the residents of the North safely home. And yeah, that's what I pointed out that yeah, I think from the start, and that's what's really disappointing. Like from the start, the goal was wrong. The goal was it was never about destroying Hezbollah. It was never actually about not only bringing Hezbollah down to its knees, but completely crushing them through the floor and completely wiping them out. I mean, something Netanyahu has also said is that Hezbollah has not only been sent back decades, uh, but now is at a point that Hamas can no longer rely on them for help. And it's a very unfortunate statement, I think, saying send back decades. Because what did happen decades ago? Decades ago, the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 was accepted that allowed Hezbollah to persevere, that allowed Hezbollah to stay in the side, or it wasn't supposed to allow for Hezbollah to stay in the south. Hezbollah was supposed to move north of Litani River, similar to Israel. UNIFIL was supposed to come in, and the Lebanese armed forces were supposed to come in the south and basically replace Hezbollah, similar to this deal, and it hadn't happened. So saying you set them back decades, it just mean okay, in few decades they're gonna be ready again. They're gonna attack you again because I mean something. when it comes to these violations of the UN Security Council resolution. I mean, there were so many, and just one to bring up in 2018, 18, IDF uncovered miles of underground Hezbollah tunnels into Israel, and at the same time, Hassan Nasrallah has said that part of our plan in the next war is to enter Galilee. And that was something we've discovered when IDF actually did invade Lebanon. When IDF did go into south, they found all the tunnels, all the staging grounds for attack. Galilee is the region in the north of Israel. They found all that, and they knew this the whole time. They knew they are ready for it, and they haven't done anything about it. I mean, maybe we could do a whole episode about how many times there were reports from institutes in Israel saying, "Hey, Hezbollah is here. Hezbollah is ready to attack us. Are we gonna do something about it?" And that's what I'm afraid in now again, that basically Hezbollah will stay in the south or will just get back into the south because UNIFIL or Lebanese armed forces cannot be relied upon, and Israel will not respond again. And it's going to be similar thing that basically, well, because it's too costly internationally, we just cannot afford the international opinion. It just doesn't look nice. We're just not gonna respond. And um,
This is
yeah, I think
total
yeah.
second-handedness. I mean, this whole affair is riddled with second-handedness. The pro-Palestinian side justifies their perspective from second-handedness. The opinions of others, drive their entire ethical argument, and Israel itself is oppressed by the fear of the opinion of the international community. And it's clear that irrespective of what Israel does, no matter how surgically they strike, no matter how carefully they try to avoid civilian casualties, the same accusations get leveled against them today as has been leveled against them for dozens of years. I mean, these are not new arguments. The genocide, the ethnic cleansing, all of this crap has been out there for decades. It's now, I mean, it was sort of fringy before, but now it's gotten popular purchase. So it's even worse. So the more Israel hesitates, the more they hold back, the more they attempt to appease these unappeasable psychopaths, the worse it is for them. They're simply tying their own hands in their own survival, and they have to dump this ethics of other orientation, this ethics of other people's opinions are valid and even matter in the matter of their survival. They really don't. And it's time for them to fucking stand up and finish the fucking job. I feel like a broken record. I feel like we keep saying the same things over and over again in these shows. But Israel has been doing the same things since 1947. They keep making the same mistakes. They keep trying to build the same bridges that are unbuildable.
Yeah, I mean, Netanyahu specifically oftentimes talks about how, he wants to create sort of like the alliance with the good Arab nations, sort of, if you nations from the Abraham Accords, for example, or the nations that Israel has, like a basically that they normalize some type of normalization, that they recognize each other. Saudi Arabia is oftentimes brought up like, oh, we just Israel just wants to be part of this. Israel just wants to be peaceful with these nations, and people are keep coming after us. And just recently, I think this was just yesterday. I'm not sure if you've seen, but there was a Oxford Union debate. Basically, at Oxford, they do this. I'm not sure how often they do them, once a month or once every few weeks. But they do like a big debate about like there's always like a preposition, like one statement, and there are two sides arguing for one arguing for it, one arguing against it. And what do you think it was yesterday? It was Israel is an apartheid state carrying out genocide. And just wondering, Mark, there were 320 votes. How do you think it went in favor or in opposition to this statement?
I'm sure it went in favor of the proposition. So, but who was in opposition to it? Was the voice an articulate one?
So just quickly, the votes in favor were 280 to 59. So
That's
overwhelming.
that's unbelievable. That's an unbelievable amount of stupid at Oxford.
Yeah, and so you asked. So I think we might do a whole episode about this, but I haven't found yet the recording of the whole discussion. So I'd rather do it when we have it. But for the Israeli side, it was Musab Hassan Youssef, which is I think one of the strongest voices you can get in like the sort of like general media out there and also it was Arab Israeli activist Joseph Haddad. I haven't. I haven't seen much from him. And for the anti-Israel side, it was Norman Finkelstein, of course, Miko Peleb, Susan Abul Hava, and Mohammed El Kurd. Um,
Four people on one side and
yeah,
two people.
I also don't get that. And also the one the pro-Israeli guy, Joseph Haddad, was also kicked out at some point. I couldn't find the context for it, why he was kicked out yet.
And Finkelstein talking like this the entire time probably used up all of the time because, as you know, with Finkelstein, every word has meaning.
Yeah, and sort of the reason to bring it up again, 200 and almost 280 points to votes against 60, and Israel has to realize that it that there is no way to sort of like uh, be seen as the moral one here. It is viewed as absolutely immoral just by the facts of its existence. By trying to defend itself in any way, it is simply not able to persist. And it has to realize it, and it has to realize that the international community will never be behind it. That they will simply not have it. They really do have to realize that yeah, it's pretty much it's only on them. It's only on what they do, and especially with something like there was a specific point I wanted to bring up. Uh,
Look,
yeah, I
look,
mean, yeah,
but the only comfort I get from something like this is that this isn't the first time Israel has been in a position where it's been abandoned by the world and more or less abandoned by its allies. I mean, America is sort of a hot and cold ally, talking out of both sides of its mouth. I mean, I think Biden wants to leave some sort of legacy behind, so he's trying to broker this deal that he thinks will, leave a he'll make him leave office on the 20th with somewhat of an upward note. But I don't consider a ceasefire brokered in the Middle East between these powers any sort of victory at all for the good or for Western civilization. I consider it once again the political class kicking the can down the road to make a more virulent and horrible confrontation for future generations to have to confront.
yeah, and also something to realize when when you're talking about this ceasefire, technically, like Hezbollah is not really involved. It's like a ceasefire deal between Lebanon and between these also overseeing countries about what's gonna happen and the UN because forces are gonna be involved. But also sort of like Israel being in this region, it has to realize that it's dealing with dictatorships for the most part. It's dealing with totalitarian nations in many cases that have no respect for individual rights, that have no even philosophy for how proper government should exist. I mean, the fact that it's dealing with Lebanon as a sort of, well, this is it's not a terrorist organization, so it's not on par with Hezbollah, but just talking about the UN Security Council Resolution 1701, Lebanon said Israel had violated it over 7,000 times. I mean, looking at Lebanon as like this is our partner that we can coordinate it and
It's delusional.
yeah.
It's simply delusional. Yeah, any authoritarian or quasi-authoritarian state that does not respect the rights of their own citizens is a criminal organization. I'll say that again. Any state that does not respect the individual rights of its citizens is a criminal organization. Their existence is illegitimate. They can make no claims. And I wish people in the international community would get that through their heads. When I said that kind of stuff on Dave Smith, his panties got in a wad. I mean, he couldn't understand that concept at all. Because apparently people carry rights around with them like a suitcase that can't be removed from them. And he did the concept that people don't have rights when their society doesn't respect them is lost on so many individuals out there. But it's true, folks. So they shouldn't be dealing with criminals. There's one way to deal with criminals, and that's with force. And
Yeah,
then negotiate after they surrender. But you have to deal with criminals by force because force is the way they deal with you.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up Dave Smith, and that's always something I always had a problem with libertarians, or sort of this general view of natural rights. I've always considered that a problematic thing because it's saying, it's just something you automatically have. Even if you are a person on a desert island, rights are natural. You have the rights, and I always find it problematic because uh, human rights are an invention. They are something we discovered. They are something we found out. During the Enlightenment era. If you go back to the sort of like the first liberals, it is like an invention. Like, oh yeah, in individual rights, like people need to be allowed to basically use their reason, to use their mind, and apply it to the real world out there. So
It's an
they can like
invention.
develop. Yeah.
It's an invention as necessary as the harnessing and domestication of fire and domestication of animals, clothes on our backs, the tools that we use to build, production. All of these things have a singular purpose to make our lives better, to improve upon nature. Nature doesn't know the concept of rights. Human beings have added that as an artifice in order to out of the observation that a reasonable being needs to be free from compulsion. If they live in a society where compulsion is possible, they need to establish that standard and rule within society in order for people to act rationally. Rights are for the purpose of protecting rational action and punishing irrational action that harms other people. So, yeah, people who have the natural rights have adopted the natural rights concept instead of the individual rights concept have definitely gone down a road that makes moral clarity in this particular situation in Ukraine and in many other world situations very unclear.
Yeah, and I think someone put up a chat or a comment on, I think, our yesterday's show, something saying like, "Oh, I agree with you guys that Israel has a right to defend itself, but I don't agree with you guys. I think also Russia has a right to defend itself." And I
Yeah,
read that as like, what does it even mean? Like, if you're using concepts like that, or when if you remember when I'm not sure if it was after Iran attacked Israel or after Israel attacked Iran, but you had many people saying, well, doesn't Iran have a right to defend itself? I mean, Iran has a right to defend itself if Israel killed someone in their land. They killed Ismail Haniyeh, and it's like, like, again, it's they're using it as a stolen concept, as like, rights is just something that all nations have. Or I don't like the idea of right to defend itself as a nation, because nations have an obligation to their own citizens to protect them. But even that idea of a country has a right to defend itself, what does it stem from? It stems from that they recognize the individual rights of their own people, and that extends to sort of the collective, in a sense, or sort of like the all citizens of this country should be protected. And therefore, the if someone attacks that nation, meaning attacks people or property of the people in that nation, that nation has to respond because it has to protect the rights of its own people. But Iran doesn't. Iran doesn't recognize any of the rights of their own people. Where would this idea of they have a right to defend itself even come from? Or for
comes
Russia,
from
for,
not
for that
making
matter.
moral distinctions between states. It comes from not understanding the purpose of a state itself. They just think that because it exists, they take that as starting point, right? The fact that it exists gives it a right to defend itself, as opposed to, well, what does the state stand for? What does it do? Is it fulfilling the proper role of a state? And they don't even know that what a proper role of a state is. The libertarians can't tell, the anarchists can't tell you that there's a proper role for the state. They don't think there is such a thing. And I think that's what contributes to their hostility in general towards the United States, because it is a state, and to Israel. It's their anti-statist mentality.
Yeah, and sort of just wrapping up this topic. So, Netanyahu says if there is a major, let me get the exact wording, if there is a massive violation of the agreement, which I already have a pro. Why even say like massive is already, if you're like non and like complete, massive is like here, right? It's like there. What does it mean? It needs to break like 6 points out of seven or something like that, or
So that's the
yeah.
very fact that it's unclear is I think the beauty of it for him politically. I mean, because it's anywhere from what, if 5,000 his Hezbollah soldiers breach the border and come into northern Israel and slaughter people, is that a massive break? Or is it if they drop a nuclear weapon on Haifa? I mean, what yeah, it's a rubber term that can mean anything.
Yeah, I
And so
mean, with those, it would most likely count among them. But when it comes to edge cases, well, what if Hezbollah stays in the south? What if UNIFIL doesn't remove Hezbollah from the south? Is that a massive violation? And
right,
if
and
and if not,
there was an article that you gave me to read yesterday that talked about these very issues, that Hezbollah is going to push the gray areas because that's what they do. And they're going to do it ad infinitum. They're going to do it forever. Well, maybe, activity at a missile site is one thing, but what if, a group of civilians are moving into that area and starting to do things in that area? Is that a violation? Are you going to shoot the civilians? Um, so there's a billion ways in which Hezbollah has become expert at, pushing the boundaries against Israel, and pushing them to the extent that they stop reacting to, until enough violations have accumulated that Hezbollah is stronger than they were when the ceasefire started.
yeah, Alex in the chat says they all already tried to breach the border today, and yeah, it makes sense. I mean, there's literally no downside to it unless they believe Israel will try to actually fully annihilate them. But I think they can happily rely on the West to come in and back Israel for a ceasefire. And I don't want to give Israel too much credit because Israel will most likely be willing to accept a ceasefire. I mean, they already did it once, so.
Well, my fear is that because Netanyahu has carried on this war so fucking long, it's so taxing on the people, since the entire economy and the population is mobilized for war. That takes away their productive capacity. It drains a lot of their resources. The Arabs know this, and so it could be that ceasefire is a way of taking the pressure off of them, giving some of their reservists a break and the chance to get back into the productive community and to start reinvigorating the economy of Israel. That's my fear, that the other side sees this as a form of weakness, as a form of part of the Israeli establishment starting to crumble in a certain way and needing to take the pressure off. Now, that is the result of carrying this war on for over a year, and when it could have been over in 3 months. All of them could have been annihilated in 3 months, probably less, given that we've seen the kind of damage that they did to Iran, even in 2 attacks.
Yeah, and so we'll keep continue to talk about it on the reality show in just about a minute or so. We'll actually go back to the main front, so to speak. Of we'll be talking about Gaza and the future plans for Gaza and what we think is the only reasonable, the only logical way to go forward, and if it has if it has any support, if it can get any support. So make sure to join us on the reality show in just about a minute or so. Let me just quickly thank Bonnie and Ginger for their super chats. Thank you, Mark, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you on the reality show in just a minute or so, and bye bye.
Yes.